So Jerry.
Yeah, Father Jerry Cobb.
Father Jerry Cobb.
A professor of English at Seattle University. And every year we bring about 25 American students here to Florence for 2 weeks. And our challenge always from Seattle is to make the Renaissance feel real. And what Sarah does such a great job of is recreating, especially from the point of view of women at the Renaissance, what daily life felt like. I mean, just actually getting through a day in terms of meals and your livelihood and what family dynamics were like.
500 years ago, because of the cost of marrying off a daughter, half the women in this room would have been in convents. Because your parents would not have been able to afford to marry them. It would have cost so much to marry them.
I must say it's one of the most compelling parts of the course is when we teach the birth of Venus, which really takes place in the same neighborhood in Florence where our students stay, and our students stay in a convent, and much of the novel takes place in the area of a convent. So it's really quite exciting. Students feel like they're entering history in a different way.
You know, males were held back as well, not being able to marry until they were 30 years old. How do you feel kind of about that dynamic between then and now?
Well, it does. It does shake people up, I think, and make us look at our own lives most closely about these same questions.
There are a lot of professional bachelors. They would never get married, that was accepted, because they could not dissipate the family wealth by having children. But they would be allowed to live the life of a young noble in Venice. They would be allowed to have a beautiful palazzo. They would be allowed to, of course, have relationships outside of their family home. And so what they needed, of course, was compliant women. They needed courtesans.
I often think of the line of Rilke's poem on the archaic torso of Apollo, where he says at the end, having contemplated this amazing work of classical art, his final line is, "You must change your life." That's his response to the art. And so I think when we read a great novel like The Birth of Venus, or when we see Michelangelo's David, or any of the great works of art we see while we're in Florence or when we're in Rome, it's how should our lives change in the face of such beauty.
By the time Titian paints the Venus of Urbino, up until then, all the Venuses that you've seen have been naked, they have been beautiful, they have been flesh and blood, but they've not been looking at you. They've either been reading a book, or they've been studying their face in the mirror, or they've been asleep. They've always been aware that there's been a voyeur looking at them. But the Venus of Urbino is looking at you. And you'll see when you go to study her for a bit, she's looking at you and she's sort of saying, "So do you like what you see? Do you want to talk about it further?" And she is, of course, a courtesan, because there would have been no way that a respectable woman could have sat for that painting.
We haven't heard about women in quite the same way, or all these women have been painted by men. We need to take that point of view into account. And then we have to talk today about how is the church and how our society structuring narratives for women, narrative possibilities. That's what my field is, literature, and that's why I appreciate Sarah's approach, because she's really talking about what narrative possibilities were available to women at the time of the Renaissance. I'm both a priest and a professor of literature, and the first time we brought students here, I had a student come up to me after the first day and say, "Father Cobb, I really think I could find God here." And then he came up to me after the second day and said, "Father Cobb, I also think I could find a girlfriend here." And I said, well, if you can find God and a girlfriend, all you really need then is a job and you're set. And but I think the women students feel the same way, that being here and engaging a culture that deals so much with art and beauty and the heritage of religious stories, there is a call to a different way of being. Just the bells tolling, the fact that we live, it's probably the longest these students have gone without watching television. Say 2 to 3 weeks of television is a certain amount of what would you call it, video deprivation, but in its place is this real fullness and their interaction with each other as a community. So I couldn't be happier with the setting and the course and the contribution someone like Sarah makes to it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.